All right. So with that, would someone like to volunteer, or I can just call on someone? Laura, is that a
I'll go ahead
volunteer?
and go because there's
Awesome.
no standard that's been set, so it's wide
Yep.
open for me.
Yep.
Um,
It's true.
so I've done 3 walks that I turned in, and the most recent one had the most difficulties associated with it. Is that the better one to go
Yeah.
with?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Um, so I do my walks at the Botanical Gardens here in Asheville, and it's a nice size. It's about a half-mile loop trail, and then there's meadows kind of around it. There's several bridges that cross the stream, so there's a lot of opportunity for different types of activities. I've been doing the walks with friends and friends of friends. So I don't know the friends of friends, but they're related somehow. So the third walk I did was last week. I had 5 women join me, and I knew 2 of the 5 pretty well, not super well. Um, it had been raining for days, and we had scheduled this a week out, and I was afraid we were going to have to cancel, but about 3 hours before time, the rain stopped, the sun came out, it was glorious. All the blooms it was lush, but it was muddy. So I went to the gardens about an hour ahead, walked the trails, figured out where the muddy spots were, and so I was pretty prepared for that piece of it. So the 5 women, we met at the visitor center. This is a standard loop I've been doing. Um, one of them announced immediately that she had to leave in an hour and she didn't have time. And she knew ahead of time, I had said, please plan for 2 hours. So that kind of put other people on edge, and someone else said, I'm busy too. And it just kind of, and I tried to diffuse that. So that's where things started getting a little strained right at the beginning. The introduction was fine. The Botanical Gardens is focused on native plants from Southern Appalachia. So people who'd even spent time there didn't even realize that it was focused on native plants. So they enjoyed hearing about that. The introduction was, pretty standard. I went to Pop. We'd go down by this pond, this lily pond, and in this beautiful area, and it's kind of off the trail. So I've been doing Pop there. Pop's tough for me. It's the most focused on me. So I'm a little uneasy, but each time I do it, it gets better. So that, again, pretty standard, running through the senses. A lot of emphasis on, stopping, take a breath, root, on your sit bones, tap your feet, feel your chest, whatever, that kind of stuff. I'm looking through my forms here. WIM went really well. That is always the easiest part. People understand it, they like it. The first 2 times I did it, people tried to list everything they saw in motion. So I've sort of changed the prompt to tell me one thing, tell us one thing you noticed in motion. It's almost always a bird. There's lots of birds in the gardens, but that's fine too. It was windy the day we were there, and so there were a lot of tree branches blowing, so there was a lot of motion there as well. So the first stretch of the loop trail goes kind of up on a small hill, and on the right are these really raised, there's a stone wall, and so the gardens on that side are raised sort of chest high. You can reach out and touch the plants and the dirt without bending down. And it works. I have mostly women in their 60s and 70s, so it works well. Some of them are more mobile than others, but they can reach out and touch the plants and all right there. The other side of the trail is trees. You can touch the bark and see. So I've been doing really tactile things on that stretch with the plants and the dirt. So what I had suggested was, which to me is kind of the heart sense, is find a plant or tree that sort of calls to you or seems important to you, and put your hand on or near that and one hand on your chest and just spend some time there. Then most of them did that, but we're moving, so they're kind of doing it multiple times. I noticed in Pop, they were fine with touching their chest, but once we were out on the trail around other people, they weren't doing that as much. So I don't know if that's a comfort thing or a memory thing. But people were really amazed. Each of the times I've done it, I never touch the leaves. I never touch the soil. So the texture part was really different for them. So invitation 2, because of the rain, said, let's walk through this next section, sort of down the hill and into this open meadow, looking for signs of the rainy days that we just had. So what did the rain do to the gardens and for the gardens and with the gardens, and thinking about the rain, and the colors were bright on all the wildflowers, all the greens of the leaves were really bright. The soil had a rich smell to it, a lot of places. So that all went pretty well. I'm going to save the one problem. Can I save a problem toward the end? Just kind of summarize what some of the issues were. And then we went to the last stretch of the loop trail. I asked them to collect colors, to notice colors they were seeing. They could look for a favorite color, or look for a variety of colors, or look for a color that someone was wearing. They had a lot of fun with this. It got much more playful and less introspective, and a lot more chatter amongst them. And so they had a lot of fun with that. And then the fourth invitation I sent, we were back in this sort of other meadow that's towards the end. And I sent them on a treasure hunt. I think, Ben, you had us do that on one of your calls. And to bring back a treasure, or a description of a treasure, for the tea ceremony. So I was setting up tea ceremony. Well, by this time, the people who were in a rush were just hovering around me, wanting me to wrap up. And then the others got kind of anxious, and no one really went and did it. They all just kind of stood around me. And because of the rain, the place where I normally do tea ceremony was a mud pit. So I kind of moved over to some benches, set the tea and all of it up on the bench. And then we had to stand away from the bench out of the mud a little bit. So we did the tea ceremony. I always have everybody take turns pouring just a little bit out and passing it around. They really like that. They like sharing that responsibility. So that part went fine. And then when we kind of wrapped it up, and the two people that were in such a hurry to go didn't leave. I pushed things a little shorter to end under 20 or under 2 hours. So I went about 100 minutes, and they stayed and talked to everybody. So anyway, but so those were all the parts that I thought, most of it went well, other than this sort of tension. And then the woman who had announced, and this is where I really need some input, the woman who'd announced she was in a hurry and needed to go. I know her, and she is very church going. And that's fine. And I thought she would just have that for herself. But two of the other women said in the introductions that they were studying shamanism, and that triggered something for her. So every sharing circle, she had a Bible verse to share. And some of the people, it just got a little tense. And then when we were talking about the rain and what water does, she started talking about the floods and destruction that water can bring. She got a little contrary with almost everybody. And again, because I know her, I could kind of softly redirect her, but I wasn't sure. I would really like group feedback on, one, someone trying to rush the group, and two, competitive spirituality, because I'm like, you believe whatever you want to believe, bring it here, keep it at home, whatever. And I kind of did say at the beginning, I'm not going to inject spirituality into this, but feel free to bring your own, so, because I knew this woman, I thought she would do that, but she had a reaction to the other women. So I think I've covered everything. I'm not even sure how long I went, but those were the main points, and I'd be happy to hear what people have to say.
All right, fantastic. So a couple of questions. Was there a highlight of the walk for you?
It was, I will say, the rain stopping just in time, and everything being wet and green and bright. People really noticed the colors. I noticed the colors. Everything smelled really fresh. The park wasn't really super crowded because it was still kind of wet and muddy. I had told everybody to wear, shoes that could get muddy. So I think that I felt like nature was cooperating with me. And it just made everything even more beautiful. And this, again, I grew up in rural Iowa with really rich soil, and spring smells like dirt to me. And so it was there that day. So for me, in my memories, that was really vivid. But everybody sort of liked getting outside after having not been outside for a few days. So that was, and then trying to incorporate the rain into it because I hadn't necessarily planned on that.
All right. And maybe you've already answered this, but what was the greatest challenge in this walk?
I think managing the personalities, and I may be overreacting that because I was a college professor for 30 years and I managed classrooms where there's a lot of personalities, and maybe I just need to step back and let it be more than I felt. I tried to do that, but I just also felt like maybe there was some way I could have diffused some of it a little bit more. No, there was no open argument, but I just was feeling some tension.
Hmm. And was there some part of the walk that you particularly enjoyed?
Uh, I think the texture part, touching in that one stretch, because people can put their hands right in the dirt without squatting down.
Hmm.
And every time I do this, people say, I've never done that. They dig in their gardens, but they go to a park, they don't touch the dirt, they don't touch the plants.
Right.
And then people also, a lot of them were talking about the wildflowers, the flowers, how much attention they pay to the flower, and they hadn't ever really noticed the leaves and the plant as a whole. And I love hearing that every time. I just think it's really interesting because they're seeing more of the wholeness of what's around them, and not just here's this one little pink flower.
Wonderful. Now, just for checking my understanding, you said that the fourth invitation was the colors one, and I was like, did I
No,
miss
I'm sorry.
that,
Touching
including pop whim and then
pop
three?
whim, and then maybe I'm doing too many invitations. I don't know. I do 4. I do pop whim and then 4 and then tea ceremony. So it
Yeah.
was the heart, touching the plants, noticing the rain, colors, and then the 4th one was the treasure hunt, which no one did. I think one woman tried to do it, but everyone else just kind of hovered. The first 3 I went out and did with them, but the 4th one I said, I'm going to stay here and set this up, and you go, and they didn't go.
Got it. So yeah, I mean, I think doing 4 is a lot for 2 hours. That's pretty ambitious. Maybe part of the internal sensation of feeling rushed is that you're trying to do so many invitations that it can feel rushed on your end, especially when you add in the circles in between all of these, and you're doing introduction, pop, whim, and tea. It's like there's a lot to get done in 2 hours, and you got the walking back to your cars. Maybe you got a little walk into the garden. Like, yeah, it's a lot to cover in 2 hours. If you had 3 hours, I don't think this would be such a problem. Within 2, I think, yeah, maybe cutting one
Drop
of
one.
one, maybe even 2. I also feel like the heart one, maybe that would be nice towards the end. It's almost like the scaffolding of each invitation kind of builds towards like kind of like a more emotional experience from a more somatic place. So like going from whim into rain, then into colors, then maybe heart or textures. I think that progression might be nice. I wonder if part of the reason why maybe they're feeling a little bit weird about the heart thing is that it's just early in the walk and they haven't fully kind of settled in. It's almost like this is the opening door to liminality, and it's still a little bit of like a strange world. It's like a little bit unfamiliar and like, oh, is this like okay? Can I do this in this way? And I think the deeper you get people into the cave, it's like now they're feeling more empowered to do those things that maybe are a little bit edgy, a little bit weirder. Um, so okay, let's talk about the rushing thing. So first of all, I'm curious if when at the very beginning she said she had to leave in an hour, so she didn't leave in an hour, she stayed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then she ended up talking to people instead of leaving. Was that because she was having such a fabulous time? She just decided not to go to her appointment, or
Well, she didn't have an appointment. She just had things to do. And
okay.
she really, that's one reason I invited her, because she's always task oriented, what's productive. And she did say at the end, she spends a lot of time working in her garden, but she always goes into her garden with a to-do list of
Uh-huh.
what she's gonna do with her time in the garden. And that this was, she did say this was the first time in, I don't know if ever or what, that she didn't have an agenda going in. Her
Yeah.
agenda was to get done and get out. Because I think she felt like she was doing me a favor because she knows me. And that's true. But she also, she said, she said, I want to go spend more time in my garden without a to-do list.
Yeah. Well,
So
that's
I thought
great.
that was good for her. That was
Yeah,
good. That was
yeah,
good.
sounds like there was
Yeah.
good healing there. That's fabulous.
Yeah.
I mean, generally speaking, when it's not, your friend or whatever, I usually tell people like I mean, you can kind of go two directions. You can either tell people like, don't come if, you can't stay for the whole thing, because it does kind of disrupt the group a little bit when someone leaves halfway through.
Right.
But
Right.
you can also just lean into radical hospitality, and it's like, this is kind of the thing about embodying the way of the guide, that there are no problems. Like nothing is a problem. So, you know, if she kind of announces to the group, like, I have to leave, and you can kind of say, anyone is welcome to leave at
Yeah.
any point. You don't have to stay. And, I really want you to enjoy this in a way that feels good to you. So if you need to go, just please notify me before you go so I know that I haven't lost you here. But whatever you need to do, that's totally fine with me. And that kind of relaxes the field. It's like the whole thing about the radical hospitality is just communicating to people that there are no problems. There's nothing that can go wrong. It's all welcome here. Um, Maybe that supports her in not feeling like she's rushing you. And
Mm-hmm.
if you know the person, and this is something that you anticipate happening, you could talk to her about that prior to the experience. But generally, um, if someone is rushing me, I usually just go full coyote and go even slower. It's like, you're not gonna rush me. Because yeah, if I'm feeling
Mm-hmm.
rushed, then everyone feels rushed, right? Like you're holding this
Right.
energetic container, and so everyone's picking up on your energy. And so yeah, it's just it's not really possible to like give them what they're asking for.
Mhm.
Um, this thing about no one doing the treasures one, I'm wondering if maybe it's just kind of fatigue. It's
I
like,
think you're right. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, there's kind of this concept that I like to think of as peak fun. It's like you're having fun, you're having fun, you're having fun. And then when you get to the peak, there's only one direction to go from there. And so if you notice people are hitting that point and it's in this particular context, you could just invite them to help you set up tea.
That's what I was going to ask, because I think this particular group would have liked doing that. Uh,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I usually do. I think maybe part of the fatigue is just doing this many invitations. It's like, and especially with this age group, like I could understand them just being like, I'm just tired. I'm kind of done. Like, can we
Yeah.
wrap this up? And it's one of those things where if people come back from an invitation and they're done, you don't send them back out and be like, hey, you still got 15 minutes. Like, get back out there. I'm still working on tea. It's like, okay, the game has
I
changed.
told you. Yeah.
I told you to get out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, the game has changed. Now you got to play by some different rules, and the participants are in this case writing the rules for you. Like you can't
Hmm.
send them back out. So yeah, I think in that case, just inviting them to help you set up tea ceremony is way less awkward than having them stand by and watch you do it, right?
Hmm.
It just creates that group cohesion where it's like, okay, we are now setting up tea ceremony, and hey,
Hmm.
could you help me with this? Hey, could you help me with that? And it's also kind of like psychologically, people understand that that's going to be the end. So like it helps them get to the end faster, which is kind of what they all want anyway. So it's like, okay, cool. Yeah, let's
Hmm.
get the tea going and get that done. Um, One thing about prompt after whim, I think instead of saying like what's one thing that you noticed, so two notes on this. The first is
Okay.
when I introduce what are you noticing after whim, I usually will add something about you might be asking, do you mean what did I notice when I was wandering, or what am I noticing right now? And the
Mm-hmm.
amazing thing about having a memory is that we can only experience it right here, right now. And then that kind of liberates people from feeling like it has to be a full list. But also, I think instead of saying just one thing you noticed, you could just limit the time frame a little bit. You could,
Okay.
why don't we share in one word or in one sentence? What are you noticing right now? And you might avoid the phenomenon of like the list. Um, Pop is tough for a lot of guides, so I just want to encourage you to keep finding ways to support yourself. I think with pop, the thing for me is just like really letting myself experience each prompt fully, and then, okay, what's the next thing? And it doesn't need to be rushed, right? Like
Right. And that's,
nobody knows what interval you're supposed to be giving in between. So it can feel a little bit weird for you because you might be like, "Oh my God, like what am I supposed to do next?" But for everyone else, they're just in it.
mm-hmm.
And then okay, we have a little bit of time left. Just this thing about circle and competitive spirituality. I mean, honestly, I don't think I would say anything about spirituality in my introduction because maybe that like invites people into it a little bit. And if it
Yeah, I didn't the first two walks, but I did this walk because I knew this woman I felt like she would bring it in, and I was trying to kind of diffuse that, and it didn't work. It probably made things worse. Yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe that backfired a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't mention anything about it because I think saying it really does invite it in and
Okay.
invites people to interpret the experience through a spiritual lens, which is fine if it kind of is just what happens. But I think if you don't say anything, it's more likely that people are just going to be like, oh, I'm noticing the rain feels cool on my skin, not like, oh, I'm noticing the rain reminds me of the flood and da 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 da
Yeah.
da, right?
Yeah.
So I think omitting that in your introduction will have a big impact, but then also just this thing of holding space for all experiences. I know that can be uncomfortable, but it's not your job to manage people's experiences and like as long as people aren't cross-talking in the circle, meaning like they're not talking about what other people are sharing,
Mm-hmm.
if they're just sharing from their personal perspective and experience, then like that's fine. Just like let them have it, let there be tension and dissonance where it exists. That can be part of the healing process. I think in some ways, like, especially in this country right now, we're experiencing an incredible polarization where we're like almost unwilling to listen to people who have different perspectives than us. And so I think it's a really beautiful healing experience when we get to listen to people who are, coming from different places. And it's not like one is right and one is wrong. It's just holding space for these different perspectives and letting them be what they are. As long as people are being respectful and not, being nasty to each other, then yeah, you
Mm-hmm.
just kind of let it ride. But I
Okay.
think if you don't mention like I'm not going to be bringing spirituality in, but you are welcome to, it'll be way less likely that people do.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
So if there's one thing you learned from this walk or this debrief that you will remember for next walk, what would it be?
Can I say two things?
Yes.
Drop one of the invitations. The people I've been going on their guided walks here locally do the 4, but they do take more time. They do 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
And then the spirituality part, just kind of don't touch it unless there's open conflict, I guess. I don't know. Or maybe not even then.
Yeah. Fabulous.
Okay.
Yeah. I think every time you guide a walk, you'll collect like 1 to 2 golden nuggets, and then by the time you've guided 100 walks, you'll have a giant bag of golden nugget wisdom, and then you'll just be super
Perfect.
awesome.
Yeah, that's why I'm here.
All right, thank you, Laura. So
Thank
if there's
you.
any comments from the group, please just pop them in the chat for Laura, and we're gonna move on to our next debriefer. Who would like to go? Angel, is that a hand like I want to go? All right. So give us around 8 to 10 minutes of tell us about your talk.
Okay. So it was five people total, six including myself. Four of the people I knew, and one person I didn't know because it was a friend of a friend. The introduction, it was interesting. It was going well. And I think people were like in tuned and they were paying attention. And then there was a raccoon actually carrying babies that just started like kind of almost running, I would say, in our direction, like towards us. So I have a very wooded backyard, and we were standing on my driveway, and apparently the raccoon was moving its babies from underneath our deck into the more wooded area. And it was coming at us. So some of the people got a little bit frightened, and they jumped up on top of like this ledge of landscaping next to my driveway. And so it kind of caused a big stir, and everybody was like kind of excited and scared. That was a little challenging because I was like in the middle of my intro. Just kind of gave a pause and commented, it's babies. And eventually, they came back. And it was interesting because we had to like walk about 5 minutes to the trail that's near my neighborhood. And the prompt that I gave was to share a happy story about nature with a partner or with people in the group. And the stranger that I didn't know actually shared like a very personable story about camping with her sister, and how she got scared because they saw a creature outside their tent, and her sister gave her a hug, and they normally don't really get along, and that's a memory from her childhood that she really treasured. So it was cool to like start the walk. I felt so honored that like already this level of vulnerability was present. That was really a gift. I thought that was cool. So then we get to the trail, and it was an unseasonably warm day. So it was about 85 degrees. And I chose a prairie path, which didn't have a lot of shade because I didn't think it was going to be like a sweltering 85 degrees and like direct sunlight for like the next 2 hours. And there like wasn't any water or anything around. So we sat down for pop, and I have sensory issues with insects, like with the sounds. So I wear these like loop earplugs, which I could still hear people talking, but it like cuts the frequency out of like certain insect sounds, right? So I took one out because I was trying to it was my first walk, and I wanted to make sure I heard as much as I could. And I'm going through pop, and I have like my notes, and this wasp came like right by my eye. Like it was just buzzing like right by my face. And I just, I was trying so hard, like just kind of, acknowledging it. This is a being that's coming to me right now. I'm really freaked out. I just kept going. But then it like came like even closer, and then I like stopped, and I just kind of gently swatted it away, but it interrupted pop. So then I was like, oh crap, I like, broke the immersion. But I got back in, just I'm sorry. Needed to take care of something, and carried on. And I remember like first invitation we were doing WIM and walking around on the trail, and like that teacher in me, and I can relate, Laura, to what you're saying. It's so hard when you're like trained to manage in that way. they were just kind of talking and hanging out. And I'm like, oh God, I think they're bored. They're not really into this. They're not like, walking around. They're just talking with each other. And then I heard that thought in the back of my head about radical hospitality. Like, well, if they need to talk to each other, then that's what they need right now. Then that's part of the walk for them. So just, I kept on going with whim. And then when we came back to the sharing circle and I asked, what are you noticing? Like the people who I thought like weren't participating ended up giving these like descriptive experiences. And I was like, that's so cool. Like here I'm thinking like, you're not even doing, anything with the walk, but they were experiencing it in their own way, in their own expression. And I was just interpreting that way because obviously it's my first, I think, projecting a lot of that. And then we had 3 other invitations and I did them about like 15 minutes because it was so hot. That's something I kind of accounted for just with the heat. In hindsight, I would definitely choose a place that had opportunities for shade, especially if it's like in later spring or summer, because like I was getting fatigued, just like getting a headache, and like it was impacting me. And I don't know if it was impacting anybody else at that time. So that's a lesson learned. So yeah, we went through 3 other invitations. And then when they were on the last invitation and I was setting up for tea ceremony, the ground was so and then like the tea, like it was just a lot of, I think hadn't practiced pouring the tea out of my new thermos and like just spilled it everywhere. And so yeah, stuff like that happened as I was setting up, but evaluating. Oh, I forgot something. As we were doing pop, in addition to the wasp in my face, I thought I saw a tick on my leg. And so like pop was really intense for me. There was a lot going on, like a lot of like self-talk was happening. Okay. And I don't think it was a tick though. I did flick it off pretty easily. So yeah, back to the tea ceremony. They came back and they were so excited to see it. They just from the look on their faces, just the gratitude of just having it all set up. They're just, invited to come and sit and share. And the stranger, the person who shared a story earlier on, just said how she, never has time and never takes time to do this. In previous sharings, and during that last one, she got emotional and she started tearing up and she like couldn't finish what she was going to say. And I just thought this is so cool in the sense that here we come together. I don't know her. A lot of people don't know her, but there's this circle of connection that's been established through this container that people can just feel this not just by themselves, but with all the beings there. It's just it's so cool to be a part of that. And then, everybody said how much more relaxed they felt and how happy that they came and had this space for peace and to actually like touch things in nature, Laura, to what you were saying, having that freedom to do that. I know, I think I'm going a little fast, but I'm just trying to hit all the main points. And then we walked back to the house after our tea ceremony, and that was it.
Perfect. So was there a highlight moment of the walk for you?
I think it was just trusting in the forest, that like I didn't have to manage it. And it was like, that was so cool to like actually experience that, to see how people were experiencing it in their own way, even though I perceived they weren't. It's like, that's not for me to judge. It's not for me to perceive of what they're doing or how that's happening. And just trusting that, they're getting what they need. And that felt really good.
Yeah, that's a wonderful thing to learn on your first walk. Yeah. Oftentimes we're like, they hate this, like they're not doing it or whatever.
I think that too.
Oh, no,
first,
it's all
yeah.
happening. All right, fabulous. What was the greatest challenge of this walk?
Probably just struggling with my own like personal fears with things. Like I said, just with like the insects and everything, and then freaking out and thinking I just like, brought everybody into a tick infested grass area. Um, that part was really uncomfortable because I thought, oh man, what have I done?
Okay. No one ended up getting any ticks or wasp bites, I assume.
Not to my knowledge. So
Right. And was there something you enjoyed about guiding this walk?
yeah, I think just observing for myself how people get what they need.
Yeah. All right, fabulous. Well, let's see. The raccoon scare is so cute. Like, yeah, sometimes stuff can happen and it kind of can freak people out. Like from a somatic perspective, this is just like spiking into a stress response. And so maybe when that thing kind of happens, and it could happen at any moment in the walk, right? It's not even like it could only happen in your introduction or something, but basically having some tools where basically it's like we're gonna pause for a second here, and maybe it's like a little mini pop almost. It's just like, yeah, let's just do some breathing, let's do some stretching. I like to do a little bit of stretching or like just some, it's like a little bit of guided stretching. Just like, okay, we're gonna stretch like way up and stretch way down, maybe just side to side. And it just gets people a little bit geared towards their embodiment, but it's also meant to relax. So yeah, just giving yourself like a little shoulder rub, just like something that kind of brings people back into a regulated nervous system. Because yeah, it's hard to gloss over when something like that happens and be like, okay, like never mind. Like I'm just gonna keep going ahead with my introduction. So yeah, it's always fine to kind of like if something like that happens, just pause and just come back to that like basically a mini pop of some kind. And then just keep going. It's like it's kind of like, they say in theater, the show must go on. And like sometimes it's, live theater and guiding, it's the same thing. You just can't plan for everything. Things are always going to happen that you don't anticipate. So then it's just like, all right, we're just coming back. It's okay. And acknowledging our raccoon friends. Um, yeah, I think maybe part of this big learning also is around trail selection, where like it is a little bit of a challenging thing when it's 85 degrees and you have no access to any shade. Like you can mitigate that by, making sure people are geared properly. Everyone has a nice hat. It's going to keep the sun off their face. Everyone has a lot of water. But if people aren't well equipped to deal with whatever particular climate you're operating in, that can be challenging and sometimes dangerous. So it's like, you know, on the one hand, highlighting the importance of prepping people to be safe and comfortable. And then on the other hand, if you find yourself in a situation where people are not equipped to be safe and comfortable, then yeah, maybe the only option really is to end the walk early. And there's nothing wrong with that either. If you're experiencing the climate as being like oppressive and dangerous, well, it kind of works counter to your intention of getting people relaxed, right? So then, yeah, maybe you just say to yourself, like, huh, it's really hot here. There's no shade. I can't get us into the shade. I can't get us to something that's going to cool us off. Maybe I'm going to do this walk in 90 minutes instead of 2 hours, or cut it down to, 80 minutes or something. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's in service to the group to not put them in a space where it's like, you know, at tea ceremony, people are sunburned and grouchy, right? uh, wasp by the face and ticks on the legs. Yeah, that does sound like a lot is going on in pop. Um, it's not really like a whole lot to tell you about this, but it sounded like you handled it perfectly. It's like just yeah, if something like that is happening, just take care of yourself and you don't have to apologize for keeping yourself safe. It's like that's just part of being a responsible guide. If you get stung in the face, like the walk is probably over anyway.
True.
I was kind of wondering in this particular circumstance, maybe it would be better to do pop standing up. Like,
Mm.
I think particularly if I'm guiding somewhere and I'm worried about ticks, I never sit down or lay down. It just feels like this is putting myself in danger, and it stresses me out. Like laying down in a field of grass where there might be ticks, like I have a really hard time relaxing, and maybe there were people in your group that also felt that way. So like when I'm going to take people into a field like that, in the introduction, I'll teach them how to like pull their sock over the cuff of their pant leg, and then you can tuck your shirt into your waistband, and it's basically like creating this like it's like a suit, like an astronaut suit or something, like sealing off all the places where ticks could get in. And then maybe standing is just a lot more comfortable. And a standing pop is great. There's a lot of things you can do with standing pop that you can't do sitting or laying down. So it opens up some possibilities for you to do stuff that you couldn't do otherwise. But ultimately, it's just about creating the preconditions for relaxation. And let's see. Yeah, people are talking during WIM. It's like, yep, you noticed when they came back that they were doing it. Sometimes it doesn't look like people are doing it, and yet they're doing it. I find that sometimes if I have a group where, welcome, Juju. If I have a group where I feel like there's a lot of people that are doing stuff like they're going off and talking, then doing some sort of a paired invitation, like where people collaboratively work together, it's just leaning into noticing that like, okay, like there's all these people here that are like really into just talking to each other. So why don't I like make some invitation where they're like going to actually get to do that, but it's part of the invitation maybe. Sometimes
Makes
I'll do
sense.
Sometimes I'll do sit spot at the end where I'll say, okay, go find a place to sit. Just notice what it's like there. Maybe turning your attention inward, turning your attention outward. And bonus invitation, if you want to do this with someone you came with, perhaps try being with that person with no words. Just noticing what it's like to be in their presence, just noticing what it's like maybe to hold their hand or just be next to them. And so it kind of just invites people, it's like, I don't know, they might be talking the whole time, but it just kind of invites them to have an experience where they're going to be with each other, but they're not going to be talking. And I think that can be really nice. So it's just kind of leaning into what is organically arising, like these people are here together and they want to be together. So sometimes I'll do like a treasure invitation where I'll say, okay, you have a partner. For the first 10 minutes, you're going to wander by yourself and receive some treasures. And then we're going to come back and have a gift exchange. So then it's like, now I've effectively created a situation where you have to be by yourself for a little while, but then that's in service to like this more intimate moment where you're going to share. Whoop.
I like that.
Good.
One question I did have, in terms of the tea ceremony,
Yes.
are you supposed to like, because they like see me like kind of wander off. Can I say like, I'm going to go set up something for our next invitation, or you just kind of like sneak away, or like, I don't know. I'm not sure how to go about that.
Well, I'll often set tea up in the exact place where I send them out for the last invitation. So I'll just be like, I'll call you back in 15, 20 minutes, whatever, and I'll be here. And then I'll just set up. But I also don't think there's anything wrong with saying like, this is our last invitation. And when you come back, we're going to gather for a final invitation of sharing some tea with each other and with the earth. And I mean, some people really love like the big surprise of like, people don't know that you're going to do that. And it's kind of like, whoa, like, what is this? But I also very often just tell people like, yeah, we're going to come back and have tea as a way of closing, especially if it's a hot day and I've got cold beverage, that's like enticing. And if it's a cold day and I've got hot beverage, that's enticing. So it kind of gives people a little like boost in their spirit to know that like in 15 minutes you're going to get a treat.
See that?
Yeah. And yeah, practicing your tea service and pouring out of the thermos. It's one of the reasons I like a teapot is because it makes pouring so much easier. I assume your thermos has like a really like wide mouth to it, which is very hard to pour out of. So
And
I think
yeah.
if you go to REI, you might be able to find a little attachment that fits inside the mouth of it that basically just like blocks some of the pouring, and then you might be able to find one of these on the internet. It just kind of makes pouring easier. So yeah, maybe finding something that will, it doesn't have to be a teapot, right? It just needs to make it easy for you so that it's not spilling so much. Because yeah, that doesn't totally work. I mean, it doesn't totally not work, but
Right,
it can be a little
right.
bit dangerous if you're doing hot liquid.
Mhm.
Yeah. So if there's one thing you learned from
True.
this walk that you're going to remember for next walk, or you remember from this debrief, what would it be?
Choose an area that has variety of shade and sun.
Yeah, that's a good one. All right. Thank
Yeah.
you, Angel.
Thank
Fabulous. And if anyone has comments for Angel, just pop them in the chat. Would someone like to volunteer to go next? All right, Kathleen, take it away.
I'll go. Thank you. And thanks, Ben, for your support of me debriefing, because after hearing these, I'm anxious to share. I'm going to set up the context. Some of you, I know we class last week with Breakout Realize I was at a retreat. So it was an impromptu, I hadn't planned for it. So there's this organization that is so near and dear to me called Love Your Brain. And it's a community for survivors of traumatic brain injuries. And for those of you I think I've shared before, sorry if I'm repeating myself, I'm a survivor. And I was a participant at this retreat 3 years ago, but I have thankfully recovered to the way that I can now volunteer at this retreat to help others. And the focus for Love Your Brain, in addition to it being community oriented, is they have science and all this history and research as it relates to mindfulness and yoga practices help in the recovery of not only brain injuries, but I think we all know just help us anyway. So someone I'm very close to in the program knows that I'm going through this ANFT certification. And she was like, you need to lead a mindfulness walk. And I was like, it's not mindfulness, it's forest therapy walk, right? And she's like, what's the difference? So that's question number one, is how do you explain mindfulness walk explanation and the difference between that and a forest therapy guided walk? And I was like, sure, I'll, thanks for the encouragement. So that was an invitation I got on a Monday and was offered to host a forest therapy guided walk on Thursday. So we had 9 participants total, 10 including myself. So I was and there was other workshops they could have signed up for during this time. So I love that like 10 people signed up. We were at this camp called Wavis Camp up in the Damariscotta Lake, or off of the Damariscotta Lake in northern Maine. So, oh my gosh, so beautiful. So the setting was spectacular. The audience was spectacular. The downside, I'm going to weave in my negatives as we speak. Oh my gosh, you went to Wabash, Juju. You know where it is. You know how beautiful the place is. Okay, thank you. And so I only had an hour. And I was like, how do I do right? And so my lesson learned is that is way too short, right? Like, right, Ben, you're nodding your head. Like I could have taken 4 hours with this group, but I had an hour. I was like, I'm going to take it, right? Something is better than nothing. An hour is better than 0. So I did the introduction, and it was interesting because there was a gentleman who was there as a participant with his caregiver, and he grew up 20 minutes away. And so as I was sharing the history of the land that I had researched that morning, he had some really interesting things to share with the audience. So that was a great introduction. Then we did pop, and Again, the audience has all differing, as every audience will, all differing abilities. Tinnitus is a common side effect of brain injury, no smell or no taste. So I knew I was dealing with an audience whose senses were going to be at all different levels. And there was an individual who was in his electric operated wheelchair, and when he was with his caregiver. And so I wanted to pick a path that I knew he could navigate, but also still get us into this beautiful peninsula that went out into the middle of the lake. So the pop was, you know, I probably spent extra time explaining the invitation and the ability to, kind of make it work for the individual, knowing there were all different needs and abilities within the group. And so then that one, there's no hiccups there. We went through that. Then the what's in motion was, for me, observing them, the highlight of it, because one of the debriefs after the sharing was, someone's like, I walked down this path, down this peninsula every day since we've been here. It's now Thursday. We've been here since Sunday. And they said, like, I noticed like 500 things I didn't even know were here. So it's just the whole slow down. I mean, the whole purpose of what, you know, what's in motion was really well received. And one person got very emotional, even talking about some of the things they saw on their journey down to where we met. So then I probably should have just done one, but I did 2 invitations. And I kind of kept things to like 7 to 10 minutes. I was trying to break down my time. And the first invitation was sound, like cupping different ears and turning around. And in the sharing afterwards, I hate to laugh about this, but there was wood cutting happening in the distance. So here we are I'm laughing with you now. I didn't laugh with the group, but like here we are on, right, just understanding the more than human world, and we can hear these beautiful trees being cut down in a forest somewhere near us, right? And so just right, but then there's other things that people picked up with noises as well. And I had meant to tell you, when we were doing the sharing, what are you noticing after the what's in motion, I was using a stick, a piece of a birch tree that I had found laying on the ground, to pass around the circle. And the simple question of, what are you noticing? And I kind of introduced, as we pass around this twig I found on the ground, it's your opportunity to share if you would like, in whatever way you'd like. And people took that as to share what they were noticing about the twig. So a couple people shared what they noticed when in motion, like the gentleman who said, I noticed things I hadn't seen after walking down this path. But like of the 8 people, 6 shared what they noticed about the twig. And I didn't correct them, even though my nature was to be like, but what did you notice when you were walking slow? I didn't correct them. I just let them talk about the stick. So I just thought that was funny. So then the sharing from the hearing exercise, and again, those individuals with tinnitus, just, you know, explain to them what they noticed and how I asked them to like cup one ear at a time and then to listen with both ears, and they modified it and explained why. So it was a good sharing. And then the second partnership invitation was 50 shades of color. So I asked them to find a color in nature and notice all the different shades of it. And again, then the sharing around what they were noticing, and that it was a good sharing. So then again, you can probably feel the stress as I'm debriefing this with you. One of the other individuals on the walk with us was another volunteer, and she was getting pinged, like, where are you guys? We're about to start the next like session. And so she comes up and whispers to me, she's like, we got to get back. And so one of the participants overheard, and she's like, oh, it's a forest therapy walk, a gentle walk out. And then we got to sprint back to the camp. And I was like, let's just walk slow. So my tea that I'd been carrying with like all these natural, like, because everything we were eating was so health eating that week for nutrients. And I had hibiscus and like all these amazing, like, I made a homemade tea in the kitchen. And I was like, oh, well, okay. So I had to pivot in the moment, and we slowly walked back to the main cabin together for about 5 minutes. And as we were walking, asked individuals to to nicely wrap this up, what's something they would like to share. And so individuals, that's when the person made the joke about we got to sprint back, but people were sharing, and it was, again, even though it could have been 3 or 4 hours, an hour was nothing because their sharings, like they were sharing what they got out of it. And then I introduced the tea that I had with me and said I was going to leave it on the the counter when we got in, and they'd be welcome to go over and help themselves to some and explain what was in the tea. So that was our closing. Wasn't kind of a ceremonial, I had my little blanket with me and little chairs and stuff, but it was more of a walking closure to then we got back and got into the next big group thing that the whole retreat was doing. So anyway, I was just like today, I'm like pinch hitting. I was thankful and grateful to have had the opportunity, especially with the audience. We were all there together to support each other in a mindful way. And that's exactly what this is.
Yay. Wow. So, okay, what was the highlight moment for you?
I kind of a specific, I think I have to answer more holistically than specifically. Just the overall experience, right? Just to see the different to observe the different engagement, to feel it. And again, it's such a special audience, like the expression of you find your people, these are my people. And so to be able to share the beauty of this forest therapy process with individuals that I relate to on a whole different level was just heartwarming overall.
And the greatest challenge?
The time. The stress. I mean, again, could you see my voice inflection as I'm like debriefing to you? I'm like, crap. It was, and I'm glad I took the window that was offered to me. But I would never do a 1-hour session again.
Okay, so knowing what you know now, I don't think it's impossible to do a 1-hour session, but what do you think you could have done differently and made it feel more relaxed and spacious?
Yeah, I've thought about that, Ben. Like, would I have maybe done, just a pop in one partnership invitation, or just this group, the What's in Motion was so impactful that if I could reverse the hands of time and know what I know now, I would have just done a What's in Motion in one invitation. So I think to decrease it, to really allow, because again, I'm visually remembering people walking along, and Juju knows where I'm talking about, this narrow path, and the lake is on each side, and just people were stopping and getting down on their knees and touching things. You could tell it was really having a moment with them. So anyway, I'm rambling on. I'd say I probably would have reduced it to even half of what I offered.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. It's kind of like what we discussed in Laura's debrief, and it's like you just can't fit that much stuff in. There's always like this ethic of do less, like the whole walk should feel spacious and relaxed, and that even at the end, you still got maybe 5 minutes to like just sit and enjoy your tea. So if I have to do 1 hour, my introduction is basically just what an invitation is. It's like, I'm going to do like a 1-minute introduction. I'm going to be like, normally this experience is like 2 hours, and I give a longer introduction. Today, because we have only an hour, I just want to explain to you how this works. Then we're going to go right into pop. Those circles, maybe it's just like a 1-word sharing, or you pair people together and you give them like 2 minutes. So that cuts the time down on the sharing circle so that you have more time to do the invitations. Whim, and then basically after whim, then you kind of critically evaluate, like, how much time do I have left? I know I want to do some sort of incorporation at the end. Do I have enough time for one more invitation? And realistically, maybe it's just one invitation, and it could just be a 10-minute invitation while you're setting up your tea, and then they come back, you do tea, and then you can walk back. I think your adaptation of the threshold was great. It's like you still got it in. In these circumstances, like one thing about the sharing circle is it's not critical that everyone speaks to everyone. It's critical that people share with at least one other person, just because it's like, yeah, this act of being witnessed and sharing, even if it's just one other person, that's where the magic is. So if you're like, uh-oh, like we have to go back, then even just pairing people up and being like, hey, as we walk back, why don't you just share with your partner? What would you like to share to make this experience feel complete today? And then kind of the spatial logistics of having a group of 10 people and walking and talking become much simpler because I don't really know how it worked, whether, you kind of walked and everyone just kind of like talked around and you could all hear each other, but it's probably challenging, right? Yeah. And then I think with this group, it sounds like, I don't know if you did this or not, but just kind of speaking to the different levels of sensory ability as part of your introduction and like naming that when you talk about modification of the invitations, it's like, I just want to recognize that some people may have differing abilities here, and that's okay. Like if I offer you something and it just doesn't work for you, then just doing whatever feels right. I always tell people, like, you can't be bad at this. Whatever you're doing is perfect. Whatever you're doing is just right. So, like, that kind of permission to just do whatever feels right can kind of support people when you have a group where there's different levels of sensory ability without people feeling like ashamed.
Is he frozen for everyone? Or is it just me?
But what feels good. I think that can be a helpful piece. Um,
Ben, you were frozen and we didn't hear your last comment.
I don't know. Am I back?
Now you're unfrozen.
Okay. Just naming in your intro about this thing of different abilities and saying, you can just modify and just do whatever feels good. I think that phrase, just do whatever feels good, can be very supportive for people because then it's not about doing it right. It's just about doing what feels good. And that, there's no gold stars or A pluses. It's just, this is about being out here and just enjoying being these bodies, being in communion with the world around us. Yeah, sharing about the stick, that's a funny one. And yeah, I mean, you're not gonna like correct people. It's just gonna be what it is. I choose not to really use a sharing piece in part for that reason. I just like to make an invisible ball of energy and pass it to someone, and then they can pass it to the right or the left, and it just goes around the circle. But yeah, it like that's totally legitimate that that's what you're noticing right now. If what you're noticing is what you're holding in your hand, then that's perfect. And then this thing about the wood cutting, I think this is a really fascinating phenomenon where like within this container, people feel very sensitive about like understanding that these are living beings that are in contact with, and then there's almost something more emotional about hearing them being under. And in a way, I think that can be really transformative, a really powerful experience for people. So I don't ever feel like it's like a failure if it's like, whoops, I made a sound invitation and there's like a chainsaw in the background. But yeah, it's one of those things where you can't plan for that to happen or not happen. So just allow it to be what it is, and it can have really powerful effect on people. And then you had asked about the difference between mindfulness and forced therapy. Well,
And mindfulness walking, she called it. She's like, is this the same or different than mindfulness walking? And so
well,
I said, what do you think?
yeah. What did she think?
She said she thought she felt, and this was at the beginning, right? We hadn't gone through it yet. She's like,
Yeah.
based on your introduction, it seems like it'll be similar, but that's more about the motion, whereas it sounds like you're going to be inviting us to be more still.
Yeah. I think it's also just like the Sanskrit word for mindfulness goes back far, far, far. It basically is interpreted as sensefulness. It's not about the mind. It's about really being in full awareness of our sensory reality. And that's not how the Western interpretation of mindfulness looks. Like the Western approach to mindfulness is kind of medicalized as a stress reduction tool. And so there's a lot of dissonance within the interpretations of what mindfulness actually means. But I would basically just say that, force therapy is really about incorporates some elements of mindfulness, but the goal is not necessarily to just be mindful. It's really to cultivate the sensory relationships with beings, and that can lead us into deeper relationship with the world around us. So there's kind of a relational aspect to forest therapy that perhaps is absent within the field of mindfulness, which is very kind of inward facing. And I think of forest therapy as being generally very outward facing.
Mhm.
Now, some people will probably disagree with me with that, but that's okay. It's one of those endless discussions where, mindfulness means something different to everyone. It's a really big field. Okay, so congratulations on winging it with 10 people. That's amazing.
Thank
And
you.
if there's one thing you learned from this walk or this debrief that you'll remember for next time, what would it be?
Just have confidence to try it.
Good.
I think we're not, this isn't anything that will harm anyone. And so just again, just try to have the confidence to try it. And it's serendipitous to me, like that Juju knows where Wavis is. Like that's just an example of and Ben, you welcome me to jump in and share, even though I haven't filled out the form yet. So just these are two examples of just try it, because you never know what's waiting for you.
Absolutely. Fabulous. Well, if anyone has comments for Kathleen, you can pop them in the chat, and we're going to move on to Elizabeth.
Hi. Okay. Sorry, I was just stretching in my chair. I'm like, this is a lot of sitting for me. So, okay. I did this. I've only done one walk, although I will say that Ben's leaving. He's so excited to hear from me. No, I'm just kidding. So I did my walk on, I was gonna say, this is my first full walk, but I lead a group of women every week, and so I've incorporated elements of the walks in many of my groups. But I intentionally chose this. It's a couple that I provided the walk for the participants. They are a married couple and they're friends of mine. I've known them for many years. And I chose them because they're very edgy for me in this sense of providing this type of service for them, especially the guy. He's just very heady. He just lives in his head. He's this is something that he would never seek out, I don't think, in a million billion years. So I was over visiting and I said, how about doing this walk? And I think just because they're dear friends, they accepted my invitation. So I did not know the space that we were going to. My girlfriend chose it, and it ended up being this forest of ironwood trees. And it was in a hunting area. Deer hunting is very prevalent on the island of Lanai. They have a severe overpopulation issue there that they call a severe overpopulation issue. But in any event, there was gunshots, like rifle shots happening throughout the walk. And so Kathleen, what you shared was really interesting. And then the conversation you and Ben just had, just this concept of us being in relationship with other beings while also hearing gunshots that were probably killing animals. So that was an interesting dynamic. Let's see. So I went through, did hospitality, a little bit of the background on the walk. It's very edgy for me to provide background information on in Hawaii, because it's a very culturally sensitive place. And so I'm just mentioning that here because there are a lot of different opinions on it, even though you would think it would just be like kind of this factual historical perspective. And so I didn't provide that, even though that couple would have been probably fine either way. But I did go through what to expect, what invitations are. There aren't really hazards in Hawaii beyond like wear sunscreen and look out for mud and loose rocks. So that's kind of lovely here. And then I did the first sharing circle around a favorite tree from childhood, and I was already kind of surprised. And as I say that, I recognize I'm going in with expectations, right? Like I have expectations about how my friends are going to perform in this environment. And so surprise was an element because I came in with expectations, and that's one of my greatest learnings from this walk. But anyhow, the sharing was beautiful about the trees from childhood. Went through POP, and I love POP. Like I just love doing POP. The embodiment practice, it really speaks to me. And I think, it's just something that I enjoy facilitating for other people. I also included a heart space piece in the POP, and that I feel like that went well. Did a pulse what's in motion. And then I did 3 invitations. I did treasure hunt, noticing or play with water, and then sit spot with a partner. So the treasure hunt was fun and light, and my girlfriend just had such a wonderful time with it. It's like she reversed in age, 10 or 20 years, and just was like, oh my God, you guys, I found this bug and you have to see it. Like she was just like really excited. And I loved that. That was beautiful. The water invitation was kind of like an invitation I caught in that forest because we went in the morning, and it's like all the dew was dripping to the end of all these ironwood needles. And it was like the forest was just covered in sparkles. It was so beautiful. And so I invited them to just touch and play with the water in the forest, and notice. And then the final invitation was sit spot with partner. So for them to go out together, they're a married couple. So for them to go out together into the forest and sit back to back, and just notice. And I also said, feel the support from the other person. And in retrospect, I think that was too prescriptive because I don't know if they're going to feel supported by the other person, right? So in hindsight, I wouldn't have said that. I would have just said, just notice. And then for threshold of incorporation, I do tea time. I don't feel comfortable using tea ceremony as the term, but I do like tea time. I think it's a bit fun and more lighthearted. And I just had, store-bought tea, because I'm still learning a lot about tea harvesting, and I was in a new place, so I wasn't really able to harvest there. And it was great. Like, I think the incorporation was a fun, light time. I'm trying to think. I mean, I think I hit like the main points. One big takeaway too for me was that I did not like speak to the forest or ask. Like, I like to ask for permission to enter a place. Like if I'm, on my home island and I'm going to go for a hike or a walk in the forest, I often will stop and just listen and try to open my heart and just say like, I'm here, and just wait until it feels right for me to go in. And I didn't do that in this space. And in retrospect, I wish I had. Not that I think necessarily, anything was wrong with it. I just feel very much more connected when I engage in that practice. So that was a takeaway for me. The other takeaway is that I was paying a lot of attention to my friend who I thought would be uncomfortable with the practice. Like I was really watching, not weirdly. I mean, it's not like I was sitting there staring, but I was definitely tuned in or trying to tune in to like his experience and how he was feeling. And I also caught myself kind of rushing if I felt like that would compensate for whatever I thought he was feeling, which is, so anyway, that was a big learning for me as well. I usually do quite well with just letting people be, but I think that I chose this particular couple because it was going to really push me, and it did, and I learned a lot. So yeah, so I think that's it. I don't think I have a lot more to add.
Fabulous. Was there a highlight moment?
I think what I mentioned, just like my girlfriend just being so excited about the treasure hunt. She came back with so many treasures that I didn't even see because I was participating, right, as well. I was just stunned at what she collected. And she really was excited in the sharing circle. She was so excited to show us this little green bug that she found, and she just thought it was the coolest thing. It was just neat to see that come out of her.
And what was the biggest challenge?
It was challenging for me to be in a space I wasn't familiar with, to lead a walk. I just didn't know what to expect. It was difficult to find a little clearing because I hadn't like scoped it out. And it was a challenge for me to not really tune in to my friend. I mean, I know them very well. And so it was challenging for me to find like the boundary there of just kind of like, this is me and this is them. And I'm not going to like feel into this, and I'm not going to assume I know what's going on.
I'm curious, at the end, did you feel like the man who you were having some expectation around him, perhaps not enjoying it? How did he feel about the experience?
He's a bit difficult to read. He certainly isn't effusive. I would say that he's very like, I keep to myself, but I did in his, I had them fill out the debrief form, and that was much more enlightening, for me. He did say that he's more appreciative of the need to connect with nature, and he feels more relaxed. His favorite part was the embodiment practice, which is pop. Nothing was edgy for him, he says. Nothing could have made it better. And he gave high scores on number 6, the scale of 1 to 10. So, I mean, that all seems positive.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I just read people, like I'm a mental health therapist, right? In my normal life. And so that's like what I do every day, all day, is just like feel into people. And so after the walk, I'm like feeling into him, and he seemed irritated to me after the walk. But then we went back to the house, and he got in the shower, and they have a small house. So, his wife and I are talking, and he's in the shower and he's singing, and I've literally never heard him sing. And so I'm not trying to read into anything, but it was just really interesting. Just the whole like full circle of it was just really interesting to me.
Yeah, that is interesting. I don't know. I've had this happen to me about 100 times where someone at tea ceremony says, "Well, my girlfriend dragged me here and I didn't really want to come and I didn't know what this was, but I'm really happy that I came and I feel great and I'm happy that I did this." So I think a lot of times people, what we do is hard to explain to people, and they might have a projection of what they think it is. But this really underscores the importance of the radical hospitality and the way of the guide and the language of invitation. That it's like when people come and they're feeling edgy about like, oh God, like what is this crazy person gonna ask me to do in the forest? And then you kind of hit them with like, you can kind of do whatever you want.
Yeah.
It's just about being relaxed and being connected and being in our bodies and being with each other. And then all of a sudden, so much of that tension disappears because it's not like we're going to force people to have a particular experience. So yeah, that's a great learning. Was there something about this walk guiding it that you enjoyed?
I really enjoy like facilitating these walks, and I particularly enjoy pop. I just think it's such a beautiful opportunity for people to connect within themselves that we normally don't. I always say to my clients, we're like heads walking around the world. Like we don't often notice our whole body that's also connected and feeding us information, and often more information than the other way. And so I just love it. Yeah.
So yeah, when you have to do a trail where there's no scouting, did you end up doing kind of just a pulse the whole way around? Like you just kind of went in, found a clearing, and then it's like,
Exactly.
all right, we're just gonna be here.
Yep. That's what
Yeah.
happened. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really the only way you can do it. So good on you for that. Because yeah, especially like, I mean, Hawaii, the trails are often not like you can just get off trail and go wandering. It's like kind of have to find a spot, and then you don't know when the next clearing is going to be, right? It could be in like 2 miles. You're like, oh no.
And clearing's a little strong for the space we found. Like, let's just say it's a good thing there were only 3 of us because it was
Right,
more
right,
just
right.
like an area without a tree. Like
Right,
maybe
right, right.
there. Yeah.
I mean, this is one of the things about working in partnership with the land and just like making it work that like, yeah, I've guided a lot in Costa Rica and it's just like that. They're like, it's a very narrow trail. There's no way to get off trail. And so you just have to adapt things. And so instead of a circle, it's more like a really long oval, right? It's like a
Yeah.
column, 2 columns, and then you like kind of loop it on the end. But yeah, I mean, you just kind of work with the space you have and find a way to make that work. Some with pop, it's like, yeah, you're basically going to be people in a long line. This can be heard by everyone. That's why I always say to people when I'm working in spaces like that, I'm like, okay, just find a place to be. As long as you can hear my voice, it's a good place to be. You know,
Mm.
worries.
Yeah, and I
Um,
think that's going to be a lot of my experiences here because there just aren't a lot of like I envy when people are like, "Oh, like who was it? I think it was Laura who said it was like, you know, it's a nice half-mile loop with lots of clearings on either side." I'm like, that doesn't exist here. Like that's not right. It's like hikes, like trails, like real trails, and then you're like in dense, right? In density. So
oh, we got beaches too. Beaches are nice and
that's
open.
true. Yeah, I've
Beaches
thought
are one
about
of my
leading at
favorite places
beaches.
to guide.
Really?
Really,
Okay.
really fun. So
Okay.
many invitations with the ocean. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Um, and you know, as just on tea, I don't know if this is prevalent everywhere, but it seems like everywhere I go in Hawaii, there's a lot of hibiscus, which is a really nice tea plant.
Yeah, I mean, there isn't a lot where I am.
No?
No, I'm, so both Lanai where I was and also where I live on Maui, we're up high. So
Oh, you're probably.
yeah, it's not common where I live. And it's really, I find hibiscus much more in like tourist areas because I think tourists equate Hawaii with hibiscus, and there is one hibiscus that's native to Hawaii, but actually most of it's imported. So there's just this whole, yeah.
Well, I'm sure you can find a lot of good tea plants, so keep going on your tea plant
I need to
exploration.
talk to Christy because I think Christy's like the master harvester. And so I've been thinking about you, Christy, and needing to reach out to ask you about that.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, I'm
I
sure
live
there's a
the
lot of.
absolute opposite of Hawaii, though. So,
That's
hard
okay.
one.
I'm sure there's local people you could ask that are probably experts on local, you know, tea plants and herbal medicine, all that stuff. But yeah,
I've definitely
it's
I've
got to be
definitely been
nice
trying. It'll come. I know it'll come for sure.
And yeah, so the thing about the prescription with support, how might you like edit that to feel less prescriptive?
I think just not saying that. Like I wouldn't say and feel the support from the other person because again, I have no idea if they're feeling supported by the other person.
Yes. And that's a good learning because yeah, if let's say they had a fight earlier that day
Right.
and then you give them that, it's gonna feel really weird, right?
That's right.
I mean, I feel like the back-to-back thing is nice. Maybe this is something where you can offer like a range of possibilities. Because I feel like if you give it to people where it's like, I want you to sit like this, it could
Mm,
feel a little bit like, okay, we have to sit back to back because she told us to sit back to back. Maybe you could say something like, you know, this kind of goes back to, I forget who I was mentioning it to, but the thing about, you know, finding a way to sit with each other without words. And so,
I
yeah,
love that.
maybe
Yeah.
sitting back to back with each other, or maybe
Hmm.
sitting side by side, maybe just having some physical contact with each other, like, maybe you want to like lay down in someone's lap or whatever it is, just like a range of possibilities so that it's not like, this is how I want you to sit. It's like finding a way
Yes.
to be in contact with each other in some way that feels comfortable. Maybe it's sitting back to back, or maybe sitting side to side, or maybe laying down like next to each other, you know, whatever it is. And then it kind of opens it up for them to make a choice about how they want to do that.
I love that. That feels much better.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good. And then entering the forest, the only thing that's hard about this when, you know, if you get there early and the group isn't there, then this
Right.
is easy, right? When you're walking in with the group, this is kind of hard. Now, sometimes people feel really strongly about this, and I feel like you can do something where you're basically going to make this like a pre-invitation, where it's like the important thing is to not make it into a situation where there's a possibility that the forest just says no, because then like, what are you going to do? Right. So if it's framed as like, you know, whenever I enter the forest, I like to just take a moment to like introduce myself and to, you know, I don't really love this thing about ask permission because again, it can feel like if someone else in the group is like, oh, well, the forest didn't give me permission. And then it's like, well, now none of us can go. Like now I have to cancel a walk basically. So framing it as like, you know, like just like when you go into someone's home for the first time and they're welcoming you in, it's nice to like say hello and just introduce yourself. Then maybe as like individuals or as a group, you can all do that collectively somehow. And it's like it like maybe happens like you do the introduction and then you do that and then you take a walk in and then you do pop, something like that. So if it feels important to you, this is like, you know, a stylistic choice about your guiding practice. I just want to encourage you to just like put some thought into it. How do you want to do that? How are you going to make that feel good for you? Because it's important that you go in feeling good.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
I love that. Okay. Thank you for the feedback.
So if there's one thing that you learned from this walk or this debrief that you're going to remember for next time, what would it be?
I don't know. I think there's a few things. I do feel it's important for me, it's about asking permission, but I hear what you're saying, but to introduce and take a moment before entering, you know, a space. And so I think the way that you outlined it feels much better, and a way to do that even with the group. It's a cultural practice here too, so that would be nice to especially like introduce with folks who aren't from here, that this is, you know, this is also part of what happens in Hawaii, especially with groups that are, yeah, like I said, just not from here. But I think that, and then the prescriptive language, I try really hard to not be prescriptive, like really, really hard. But this was helpful too, in not just prescription, but like shifting language to make it feel more spacious for the participants to do it in a way that works for them.
Beautiful. Yeah, you know, I can tell that you have a like a keen sense of this thing with prescription because you recognized instantaneously like, whoops. And I've done that many times, and it's exciting kind of when it happens because then it's like you only make that mistake once.
Yeah.
And then, you know, you just keep like bagging these moments of like, oh, that wasn't right. I'll not do that one again.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
All right. So last but not least, Juju.
Okay, hi everybody. Sorry I was late. I had a late meeting.
No worries.
So yeah, I had a walk on Tuesday of last week. And yeah, it was me and three of my friends. So pretty like low pressure in that way. But I also was feeling like, oh yeah, these are just people that like I basically asked as a favor to come with me, and they're not necessarily like, I don't know if they would have done that of their own volition. But they also are all kind of granola in different ways because they're friends with me. Obviously, they have to be. So that was also good, I guess. Yeah, so we were in Prospect Park, which is the nearby park to me here in Brooklyn. And yeah, I was kind of struggling to figure out like where to do the walk still. It was a Tuesday afternoon, so it wasn't like crazy busy like on the weekends, but there definitely were people around. There kind of always are going to be people around. It's just impossible to get to a remote location in this part of the city. So yeah, it was like there was like a waterfall kind of area, and I was right next to that on this kind of sloping path. I was hoping to go a little bit off trail and then found like some discarded like drug paraphernalia, and I was like, oh, okay, gotta redo that plan last minute. So yeah, it was pretty like functionally okay in terms of like where we were, and there was like kind of a trail that they could go down. I did like, the standard sequence pop, and that was probably the kind of more difficult part for me just because I was so hyper aware of like I don't want to like bore them, I guess. It wasn't clear to me what the right pace was. They also told me at the end, like, we weren't bored, like you could have gone slower. But I think for me, like letting those silences just like sit and trying to figure out what the like right pace of that, like I'm still working through that. Um, but it was funny because by the end, like I was also kind of in the like semi-liminal space. And so I was like much better with the pacing and like everything was coming much more naturally. So it's a mental game in that way. Um, yeah, I mean, pop was good, and then I mean it was good, but too fast. And then what's in motion? Oh, also actually before that, like um the intro, I kind of still am struggling with. Like, Ben, I'd love just like a quick recap if you can just give like your 2 sentence description of like what is this? Because like I know what it is, but like that's just a hard thing to, yeah, I just keep saying like sensory immersion and I don't know. So that's something I'm also thinking about. So yeah, also for people who like aren't, if you're not from the area or you don't live in the community, like some people were visiting, it makes more sense to me sometimes to be like, oh yeah, this is like cultivating a relationship like with the place that you live and the nature that's here. But that also isn't always like applicable. And other people were talking about like visiting places, even just on this call. So yeah, and then when we did WIM, that was I think when I started to feel more confident and like again like trusting the participants because they were having a nice time. A couple of them like immediately took their shoes off, which ended up being an issue because of some poison ivy. But yeah, I did mention that at the beginning, and I think it was, yeah, so there ended up being some on the outskirts of the trail, and people started wandering off the trail. So I'm trying to understand like how much I need to like really scout where it is beforehand. Or if it's okay just to like warn people and say maybe, stay on the trail if you're going to take off your shoes or something like that. Um, and let me think what else I did. Um, yeah, so pop and then whim and then an invitation about like I did three invitations. So I also only like someone had to leave, so I was kind of like rushing that also. So I think I fit it into like an hour 45. And I was glad to be able to do like 3 invitations still, but it was all kind of like it wasn't like the most relaxed thing. So yeah, I did a few invitations, and then and they really loved one that I did that I was calling like green perfume. to kind of find different green things and like discover their scents and combine them with other things. And it was really cool. Like one of my friends found, she made this like amazing combination of green scents that smelled like Italian food. It was really cool. And so they really enjoyed that one. So would recommend that if you're ever looking for something more smell related. And then used the waterfall that was nearby and had them do sit spot there for the third invitation. And I think they all enjoyed that. There were definitely people around though, because it's like kind of a spot people go and like, you know, waterfall vibes. But I also heard from my friends that they would have like enjoyed a longer sit spot too, because that was like their culmination. So I think they were getting more into the liminal space at that point. So then I'm calling it tea party, just kind of the way I think about things. Everything is a party. And I had a poem by Mary Oliver, who is my very favorite, called Wild Geese. It's beautiful. And when I was reading it, like a very loud airplane went overhead, and it was just a bit awkward at that point too. I was like, do I stop reading and like, is that weirder, or do I try to keep reading through like the kind of reverberating noise? And I also realized that like if I serve the tea and then I'm like, oh, I have a poem, but I like didn't say, oh, start drinking your tea, like please like start enjoying it. Because they like kind of all waited and then they like didn't drink their tea until I was done. So that's something for my own, just like to note, like to welcome people to start enjoying that. And then I'll read this as they kind of have that moment to themselves, before sharing, kind of to conclude the walk. So yeah, that's what's up.
Fabulous. All these walks sound great. All right. What was the highlight moment for you?
I think just seeing them get into it, like, because it was my first walk, and even I think almost more so because it was my friends who had been a kind of like doing it as a favor, to see that they were enjoying themselves. That was what made me happy and relieved. So yeah, I think just like seeing them explore was really fun.
Nice. And what was the greatest challenge of the walk?
I think it was my confidence in myself and in the process at the beginning, and also like the continual logistic difficulties of like how many people are around. And that's also something that my friends mentioned, because I had them do like the feedback stuff and they were like, oh, you know, I wish we could have somewhere more remote. But I'm just like, how do I do it in the city if we can't have that at least in the public park? Yeah, that was challenging.
Yeah, you should just get them to buy you a private garden.
I know, that's what I'm saying, literally.
And what was something you enjoyed about guiding this walk?
Probably seeing just how much kind of more peaceful they were at the end.
Fabulous. Well, let's see. Okay, let's start with some introduction stuff. So yeah, you know, it's funny because I don't think I ever actually say what we're doing or like what it is. Some guides like to have a bit about what it's not. You know, it's not a naturalist walk, it's not a hike. We're going to be moving slowly. When I talk about invitations, I guess I do say something along the lines of like, you know, this entire experience is just about relaxing and just being here and doing what feels good in your body. So in that sense, it's like there is no thing that this is. It's just like a container in which anything is possible and everything is optional or modifiable. It's just going to be like an emergent experience. I guess I try not to say what it is because then it feels like I've created an expectation about what it should be. So yeah, most of the time my like elevator pitch on this is like we're going to be relaxing in nature and connecting with our senses. And that's pretty simple, but that's kind of just what it is. And then, yeah, it's like this first invitation. I don't call it pop. I just say this first invitation is about awakening our senses. And then you do that. Okay, this is a gathering. It's time to share and a time to listen. So you kind of like explain it as it comes, not at the beginning, like try to encapsulate the whole experience and like this is what it's all about, right? One thing you might consider adding into your introduction if you're going to be working in the city, I often add this piece where I talk about like, when people come to a forest bathing experience, they often have a projection about hoping it's going to be very tranquil and serene. And obviously, we're here in Prospect Park. There's going to be human sounds and human things going on. One of the things that I love about this practice is that it offers us the opportunity to practice unconditional love towards place. And we talk about unconditional love towards people quite often, that we should just, accept people as they are, but we often don't give that sort of love to the land and to the places where we're at. We often wish that it were quieter, or it were more beautiful, or it were this, or it were that. So maybe for the next 2 hours, we can just try to open our hearts a little bit more and just see if we can love this place just as it is. And that can kind of shift people's frame a little bit. It's like, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, because I'm sure that everyone is probably coming in being like, yeah, this would be better if this, if that. And so just kind of addressing it in the introduction and kind of saying, you might have those feelings. I wonder what it would be like to really just love this place exactly as it is and not wish that it were any different. And then just going forward from there. I often have airplanes, and helicopters are even louder than airplanes, I find. But one of the jokes I have is when I used to do some stuff at the Ojai Foundation, I kind of picked this up there. Whenever an airplane would come by, we would call it the mindfulness jet. And whenever it showed up, it was just an invitation to just stop and to just listen. And if one comes over me during pop, no matter where I am in pop, I'll just say, noticing how sounds come, and then I'll just pause until the sound is starting to fade, and then I'll say, noticing how sounds go. And then just picking up wherever I was in pop. So just inviting that in, incorporating it into your process can be nice. But yeah, maybe you want to add that into your introduction. If it's very common, you can just say, oh, I've paid the city of New York to make sure that we have these moments of mindfulness throughout the walk. And so whenever the plane comes by, it's just going to be an invitation to stop what we're doing and just let it pass. And then we'll continue. And that can just be like fun, and it just brings it in and makes it part of the experience. What's the maximum number of people we should be having on a walk at this point? You mean like for these practice walks? Yeah, I mean, you're not gonna fail. If you do 4 walks, it's great. The intention is one of the walks is a one-on-one walk just to see what it's like, and the others have 4 or more people, but 3 is fine. You can count a walk with 3, it's not a problem. Let's talk about poison ivy. So maybe you expected your granola friends to really know a little bit more about poison ivy, but did you show it to them? Like, were you aware that it was there and you kind of like walked over and you're like, look, this is poison ivy?
There was more than I had even seen, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this is one of those things about just developing a relationship with the place, and maybe you don't want a guide in that specific part of the park. Maybe there's a place with less poison ivy, but yeah, probably I like the way that you suggested this to yourself. Like, if you want to take your shoes off, be really careful about wandering off trail because there can be poison ivy here. I mean, poison ivy and poison oak are kind of tricky plants because even if you walk through it with your shoes on, the oils from them can get on your shoes. And then when you go to take your shoes off, you can get it on your hands. And then if you itch your eyes, you can get it in your eyes. And it's a pretty tricky plant. Very challenging the way it operates. So yeah, maybe part of it is just really pointing it out to people very specifically, and maybe part of it is choosing a place with relatively less, or yeah, just really naming it as like there is a lot of poison ivy here. So if you're gonna go off the trail, just be really aware where you're putting your feet. Like there's not much more. I mean, just setting these boundaries, it's kind of either like, well, it's either like, please don't go off the trail, and then I will, know that you're not going to get poison ivy, or let me try to make you really understand where it is and how to avoid it. And then, yeah, like many people in this debrief session, I would say doing less will really support a smooth, relaxed experience. Like, yeah, for me, a 2-hour walk, I very rarely do more than 2 partnership invitations. It's like, and even at that, I'm like, this is like, I can't even imagine fitting a third one in. So I think typically when people start guiding, there's this feeling of like, to make this valuable, I have to give you like a ton of different experiences. But I think ultimately the thing that is really the gift is the spaciousness and the relaxation and that feeling of like, wow, we're like not in a rush here and we're just vibing out here in the woods. It's like that's what makes it kind of magical, not the diverse palette of sensory experiences. So yeah, just like picking 1 or 2 and just letting them be long and comfortable and spacious. And then, you know, if it feels rushed with 3 people with 3 invitations, then if you take 10 people out, now it's going to feel even more rushed, right? So just thinking about how much can I really get done here without it feeling stressed, how can I make this feel really spacious, really relaxed? You also burn a lot of time in like these moments in between where like you coyote call back, and then sometimes it takes 2-3 minutes, and you do that like 5 times in the walk. So that's like 15 minutes all of a sudden is just poof, gone. There's like a lot of these little moments where it's like you lose time without even thinking about it. Just the 1 or 2 minutes that it takes you to explain the invitation, you do that 4 or 5 times. Okay, that's another 10 minutes gone. It's like time slips away in all these weird little places. And so really just limiting your invitations and saying, how much can I do here, I think is important. And oh, this thing about people. You can also add that into your introduction. Sometimes I like to do this thing where if I'm guiding in a really public place, I might say something like, where we are here has these really funny animals. They're called human beings. And if you pay attention, they all move in very idiosyncratic ways, especially the little ones. They move in really funny ways, and they sound different and they look different. So as you're going around here and being inside of this experience, offer some of your attention to the people here. Just seeing them as animals in this space, just noticing how they move and how they look. And then it kind of works to dismantle that idea of like a separation between humans and nature. It just kind of like works to build the perception that people are part of this experience. So then it's not that people are resisting like, oh, like there's all these people here, it's so annoying. It's like, oh, there's all these people here and they are part of this experience. I was just running an immersion at the Santa Barbara Botanical Garden, and I thought it was really interesting that a lot of people had these like really profound experiences watching people. And it just became part of their nature experience. It was really cool. And oh yeah, and tea. I don't think there's a right or a wrong way to do this, but for me, I like serving the tea and just saying, we'll all take the first sip together. So it feels kind of like that moment that we all drink the tea together is kind of like a thresholding moment. And after you take that sip, it's like, all right, and that concludes our forest bathing experience today. I want to thank you all so much for being here. Now we have some snacks and we can just enjoy hanging out for a little while. So you don't have to do it like that, but choosing a moment that kind of represents like the ending. It could also be that you serve the tea and you say, please drink the tea. And to close, I'm going to read this poem by Mary Oliver. And then you read the poem and then you say like, okay, that concludes our forest bathing experience today. Thank you so much for coming. Da, 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 da. So yeah, there's no right or wrong way to do that. I think the important thing is just picking a moment that for you represents like a clean conclusion. And then however you want to do it is fine. All right, fabulous. So, just in time. If there's one thing you learned from this walk or this debrief that you'll remember for next time, what would it be?
Do less.
Great one. It's an amazing one. Do less. Fabulous. All right. Elizabeth, what's the limit for remotely guided walks? There is no like limit. It's whatever you're comfortable with. The limit is how many people you feel comfortable guiding. All right. Well, everyone give yourself a big pat on the back. So amazing. You guys are out there. You're doing it. It's awesome. And yeah, thank you for being brave and debriefing on our first call. And thank you for those of you who came as witnesses. I hope you learned some stuff and absorbed some stuff. I hope that this kind of explains for all of you how important these debrief calls are, that it's like you're not just getting the debrief of your own walk, but there's also probably a lot you're picking up from hearing other people's debriefs as well. So yeah, I'll look forward to seeing y'all next time. And yes, I can do another question. We have 2 minutes. What's your question?
Oh yeah, this is the logistical one, just about my own scheduling. So I don't want to keep anyone else.
All right. Well, if you need to run, hope you have a fabulous rest of your evening, morning, afternoon, and we'll see you next time.
Hi. So sorry to have so much confusion, but I know you, or I think it was you or Tam, I don't remember which one of you guys, like helped me get organized to do one of the remotely guided walks with Darlene. So I just got a new job, started this week, so like my schedule has been totally weird. Can I actually do one with you that you're guiding on May 31st instead? Is that okay if I join that one?
Sure. Just have you already like connected with Darlene and all that?
No, I haven't been connected, but I just remember that someone from our training team had said that like Darlene was expecting me. So yeah, that's all I heard about it.
Can you email basically this month Tam is on emails. So we alternate months doing that. So can you just email the Honey Badger account and just say you're gonna go on a walk with me on the 31st, and then I can send you the link for that.
Okay, sounds good. Perfect.
All right, perfect.
Thanks.
All right, I'll see you then.
See you soon. Bye.